All right, let's dive into one of the biggest headaches in the entire modern economy, state income taxes for a mobile workforce. For the longest time, the rules were pretty straightforward. But now, with a workforce that can literally be anywhere, those old, dusty rules are just colliding with reality and creating absolute chaos. So today, we're going to break down exactly what is going on.
So here's the plan. We'll start by framing the core problem we're all facing. Then we're going to unpack two really key legal ideas. Nexus, that's a state's right to tax you in the first place, and apportionment, which is how they figure out their slice of the pie. From there, we'll get right into the weeds of the super controversial convenience rule, the absolute mess of filing requirements, and then cap it off with a huge Supreme Court decision that really puts this whole system into question.
So what is the fundamental issue we're talking about here? Well, to put it bluntly, the old tax system is completely broken. It was designed and built for a world that, let's be honest, just doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, think about it. For decades, state tax was simple. You tax the person where they physically clocked in for work. Easy enough. But what happens when the office is a laptop in a totally different state? Who gets that tax money? Is it the state where the company's fancy headquarters is? Or is it the state where the employee is actually sitting in their pajamas, typing away? This is the core conflict, pitting what we call source states against resident states. And believe me, the rules are a tangled, confusing mess.
And that brings us to the very first legal hurdle a state has to clear. It's a concept you absolutely have to understand, called Nexus.
You should think of Nexus as a kind of constitutional gatekeeper. It's the legal green light that says, okay, yes, this state has a legitimate claim to tax your income or your company's activity. Without Nexus, a state has no power, no jurisdiction, period. But what actually counts as that minimum connection has changed a lot.
And you can see that evolution right here on this slide. The old rule, which came from a case called Quill, was all about physical presence. You had to have a building, a store, an office, something you could touch. But then, in 2018, the Wayfair case just blew that up for sales tax, saying a big enough economic presence was all you needed. But, and this is the key for remote work, a single employee working from their home office, that is still considered a physical presence for their employer. Just one person can trigger a full-on tax compliance nightmare for their company in that new state.
Now, there is one federal law that offers a little bit of protection. It's called Public Law 86-272, and it's been around since 1959. But look, it is an incredibly narrow shield. It only protects companies selling actual physical goods, and only if their activity in that state is limited to just soliciting sales. Nothing more. And here's where it gets really interesting in our modern world. The Multi-State Tax Commission is now arguing that basic website features, things like post-sale customer chat, or even placing tracking cookies on a user's computer, go way beyond solicitation. And if they win that argument, that old federal protection is gone, exposing tons of online businesses to that state's income tax.
Okay, so let's say a state clears the Nexus hurdle. They have established the right to tax. What's next? Well, they can't just grab 100% of your income. They have to figure out what portion they're actually entitled to. And that process is called apportionment. Now, for service-based income, there are basically two ways states do this. The old-school way is called cost of performance. It sources the revenue to wherever the work is physically done. Pretty simple. But the modern trend, and this is a huge shift, is market-based sourcing. This method sources revenue to where the customer is, the person actually getting the benefit of the service. You can see how this has massive implications for remote work, right? Suddenly, where the worker is sitting becomes a lot less important than where their client is.
Okay, let's make this real. Imagine a commuter who lives in New Jersey but works for a company in New York City. They split their time evenly. 120 days in the Manhattan office, 120 days working from their home in Jersey. Now, under the standard, logical rules, the math is easy. New York gets to tax 50% of the income for the day's work there. New Jersey, as the home state, taxes 100%, but then gives a credit for the taxes already paid to New York. So no double taxation. It all evens out. Simple, right? Well, not so fast.
And this is where things get really, really aggressive. A handful of states have a special sourcing rule that's so controversial it completely torches that standard calculation we just did. It's called the convenience of the employer rule.
This right here is the heart of the rule. It says that if you work from home just because you want to, for your own convenience, the state is going to pretend you never left. They will tax you as if you were sitting at your desk in the office every single one of those days. The only way out is if your employer requires you to work from home for their business necessity, not your personal preference. It all comes down to a single question. Why are you working remotely?
New York is the poster child for this, with its rule right there in Regulation 20 NYCRR 13.18. So let's go back to our New Jersey commuter. Under this rule, New York taxes them on 100% of their income, even for the days they worked from their kitchen table in New Jersey just because they chose to. Delaware, Nebraska, and Pennsylvania have similar rules. But then it gets even crazier. Connecticut and New Jersey have retaliatory rules. They only use this logic against residents of other states that do the same thing to their residents. It is, quite literally, a direct tax war happening mostly between New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York.
So as you can probably tell, the sourcing rules are an absolute minefield. And all of this complexity creates a massive practical problem for everyday people, just figuring out how to file your taxes.
The compliance burden is just chaotic. You have some states that are first day, first dollar, which means technically one single day of work in that state creates a filing obligation. It's wild. Then you've got states with monetary thresholds, like California's over $1,500, or day-based thresholds, like New York's over 14 days. For years, there's been a bill in Congress called the Mobile Workforce State Income Tax Simplification Act, which would create a simple national 30-day safe harbor. But it has never managed to become law.
Now, with all of this aggressive state behavior, you're probably asking yourself, wait a minute, is there a constitutional limit to any of this? And the answer is yes. It comes from a landmark 2015 Supreme Court case that you need to know about.
The case is Comptroller of the Treasury of Maryland versus Wynne. And here's what happened. The court was looking at Maryland's tax system. Brian and Karen Wynne were Maryland residents, but they earned income in other states and paid taxes to those states. Now, Maryland gave them a credit against the state income tax, which is normal. But, and here's the catch, they refused to give them a credit against the separate county income tax. The results? The exact same income got taxed twice. And so, the Wynnes sued.
To figure this out, the court used this brilliant legal tool called the internal consistency test. It asks a really simple hypothetical question. What would happen if every single state in the country adopted this exact same tax law? If the result of that thought experiment is that doing business across state lines gets taxed more heavily than doing business all within one state, then the law is unconstitutional. It fails the test.
And that is precisely what the Supreme Court found. Justice Alito, writing for the majority, said Maryland's scheme completely failed the test and therefore violates the Dormant Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The court sent a crystal clear message. States cannot create tax systems that structurally punish interstate commerce. The total tax you pay cannot be higher just because you had the audacity to cross a state line.
Okay, so this brings us right back to the convenience rule. And it tees up the biggest, most explosive, and still unanswered question in this entire field. After the Wynne decision, is the convenience rule even constitutional?
The legal arguments against it are incredibly powerful. First, the rule clearly creates the exact risk of double taxation that the Wynne case was meant to stop. Second, it seems to completely fail the internal consistency test. I mean, if every state had a convenience rule, a worker living in state A but working remotely for a company in state B would be fully taxed by both states on the same income. And finally, critics argue it acts just like a tariff on out-of-state labor, the quintessential evil, as the courts call it, that the Commerce Clause was specifically designed to prevent.
This whole confusing, complicated mess really forces us to ask a fundamental question. As work itself becomes borderless, can our tax laws really stay stuck in the past, defined by these arbitrary physical state lines? Or is a complete revolution in how we tax work not just a possibility, but simply inevitable?